Hi, I'm Dr. Chuck Betters. I want to welcome you to Mark Inc. Ministries. And I have a question that someone raised, which I think is becoming more and more a tough question for my generation, for the baby boomers. Many of us are facing a very similar situation, a very similar question than this one. I am 62 years old, and last year my husband and I decided it was time to move my mother into our home to care for her. You see, she has Alzheimer's disease and really started declining quickly. I want to take care of my mom. I mean, she raised me and was always there for me, but lately she is getting worse and worse. She barely knows who I am, and her sun setting is becoming more aggressive and filled with anger toward anyone around her. I know it's just the disease talking, but it is breaking my heart as I can't help but take some of it personally. I'm starting to think we might need to look into a facility to put her in, but is that abandoning my responsibilities, abandoning my mom? Am I being selfish? I think this is a growing crisis among baby boomers. Statistics tell us that 1 out of every 4 caregivers live with the elderly or disabled loved one he or she cares for. Now, those kinds of living arrangements can have many positives. For example, if your parent or loved one is still relatively healthy, he or she may be able to help out with responsibilities around the house, babysitting, caring for the home, etc. But it can also have a very devastating and very difficult effect on the relationships between you and your husband, between you and your children, between you and the loved one. I remember a pastor friend of mine, actually one of my mentors, spent a whole career, I think almost 50 years in the ministry, and he served the people of God well. He was a beloved pastor, faithful to the word, a family man, raised boys to know, love, and fear God, had a wonderful relationship with his wife, who also is a very godly woman. Well, he developed a form of dementia, and everything changed. No one could believe the effect that this disease had on him. He became more violent and more abusive, and language came out of him that no one knew existed. And we knew it was the disease talking. And everyone understood that, but it was still very difficult and very painful. It still is for his wife and his children to see. So it does become a very difficult decision. You have to raise some questions. You have to ask and answer some questions that will help you to determine whether or not it is the right thing for you to do. I think it's important. It's incumbent upon every family to allow that aged parent to become as self-sufficient as possible for as long as possible, to keep them in their own home as long as it is safe, as long as they have an opportunity to interchange with them, to check on them, to care for them. But there does come a point, there does come a time when for that loved one it becomes dangerous for them to live alone. But that doesn't necessarily mean they need to come and live with you. Living in a nursing facility or a rehab center or an assisted living center is not as disgraceful as it used to be. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of good choices that people have today. It's very costly. It's very expensive. And financially, it has to be something that is doable and workable. But there are a lot of questions that need to be asked, a lot of questions that need to be raised before you make that decision. And as I study the experts, they say these are just basic questions that you need to answer. What kind of care will the person need? How much assistance and supervision can you provide? How well do you get along? That's a very good question. Is your home older adult friendly? And can you make it so if it isn't? Will your family member contribute financially? Or is the entire financial burden going to be upon you. And there are other questions to ask that have to be done before you make this decision. This is something that you need to do as a family, even with the loved one if necessary. How do your spouse and children feel about the move-in? Does your spouse get along with your mother or your father? Will your family member be able to live by the rules of your home? You see, it is your home. It's not their home, it's your home. Will they be able to live with the dynamic of family relationships within that home? Will you and your family be able to adjust to the changing lifestyles involved in having an older adult live in your house? Do you have the time to take this on? Are you going to be available? Or are you moving from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak? Will your elderly relative have a social network apart from you available to them? In other words, will there be a support base you can lean on? These are just some of the questions that the experts tell us you need to ask before you make this decision. And it's not always the right decision for that mother-in-law or that father-in-law to come to live with you. It may not be the right decision for them. It has to be something that you carefully talk through. So a family conference is in order, sitting everybody down while their still mental faculties are still there, and reasoning these things through to decide what is in the best interest of that particular person who has the deed. I hope this helps.